Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Five Palestinians were martyred today and more than 10 others were injured by an Israeli warplane raid of a civilian car in Gaza City. Eyewitnesses said that an Israeli drone launched at least one missile at a civilian car on the Salah ad-Din road in the Tafah neighborhood in the city. The martyrs are Ashraf Shallouf and Munir Sukkar, Ahmed Suwaisi, as well as two brothers, Ra'ed and Ala al-Batsh. Two brothers were also martyred, Allam Abu Saud, 14 years old, and Nidal Abu Saud, 15 years old, in an explosion of a mysterious object planted by the Israeli occupation army east of the Burayj camp in the center of the Gaza Strip.
The new Hamas-dominated Palestinian parliament today voted to repeal a series of measures passed last month by the former Fatah-led chamber. In the first working session of the new House, 64 MPs voted to repeal the measures. There were no votes against and 6 abstentions. Fatah MPs earlier walked out of the chamber as a sign of protest after heated exchanges with deputies from Hamas, which trounced Fatah in the Palestinian general election on January 25th. On February 13th, MPs appointed Fatah men to key administrative appointments and backed the creation of a constitutional court whose members would be appointed by Palestinian Authority President and Fatah member Mahmoud Abbas. Deputies from Hamas believe that because the session was held after the ballot in which Fatah was roundly defeated, its decisions were invalid. Upon taking up its post last month, new Hamas Speaker Aziz Touek immediately froze those decisions and said they would be reviewed by the new House. Acting Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said that Israel would take the initiative to separate from the Palestinians if they were not mature enough to cooperate in the process. Olmert, speaking by satellite from Jerusalem to the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee conference, said yesterday he was not pessimistic about the future and would work with the Palestinians to build up a process to solve outstanding issues between them. But he said Israel also aspired to ultimately decide on the permanent borders for the State of Israel while separating from the Palestinians. Border setting is the key agenda of the Israeli leader's Kadima party, which holds a commanding lead ahead of the March 28th parliamentary vote.
Karim Abdul-Zaid, the spokesman for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, warned that a humanitarian disaster in the Palestinian territories may soon be around the corner if donor countries cut aid provided to the Palestinian Authority. Israel is withholding tax revenues due to the Palestinian Authority and has called on donor Western nations to freeze all humanitarian aid in order to place pressure on Hamas after winning in the last elections. Meanwhile, the Israeli occupation forces are taking measures that will have severe consequences on the well-being of Palestinian residents, especially in the Gaza Strip. When one sees no passing signs proliferating in the crossing of Al-Mantar, it means that Gaza's most vital organ for survival is being cut off. This is not simply a metaphor. It is part of an organized effort to starve the inhabitants of one of the world's most densely populated and poverty-stricken areas. The result has been a constant dwindling of wheat, sugar, and cooking oil supplies in Gaza, which may run out in the days to come unless Israel reopens the main crossing point for these goods. In an act of collective punishment, the people here are paying the price for Hamas having won the last elections. This from a statement by United Nations officials in Gaza. David Shearer, head of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, had this to say.
What we were saying is, please.
What we are saying is, please, we need to move quickly. If we don't move quickly, conditions for the people here will go from bad to worse.
The issue is not only about the shortage of supplies. Prices have skyrocketed, which put added pressure on an already unemployed consumer. Meanwhile, profits for vendors do not exceed a mere promise to pay.
A bag of flour, which used to cost 50 shekels to buy and 55 shekels to sell, today it costs 83 to 85 shekels just to buy. Now we have to sell it for 90 shekels.
Israel denied responsibility for holding up transport vehicles carrying the food supplies at the crossing point. The occupation forces claimed that it had offered to allow for the use of a different crossing for transport, but the Palestinians refused.
Humanitarian problem in the territories.
Israel did not create the humanitarian problem in the territories. It was created by the terrorist organizations there and the Palestinian Authority's failure to take serious measures to deal with them. When the Palestinian Authority protects its own people and it prevents terrorism, aid to the Palestinian people who need it the most will soon continue without obstacles.
The battle for food has now started. Not too long ago, most Gazan families, including the poorest among them, stored weeks of supplies of wheat in case of emergency. But the situation is very different today. Hunger caused by the crossing difficulties is slowly encroaching on many homes in Gaza. Food is a priority for people. Right now, they can only hope that choices will not be so limited in the coming Palestinian days.
The Palestinian acting Prime Minister Ismail Hania has expressed optimism that Russia may play an effective role in the Middle East, which may serve Palestinian interests. He confirmed that Hamas is open to dialogue with bodies of the international community, including the United States. Mr. Hania added that Hamas has received an invitation from South Africa and it will be followed by other visits to various European Union countries.
احنا قدرنا لروسيا هذه الدعوة ومتفائلين من هذه الزيارة.
We have expressed gratitude towards Russia's hospitality and we are very optimistic about the outcome of this visit, especially since Russia is an effective political player on the international stage and it is an important member of the Quartet Committee. We hope that Russia will be more politically effective in the Middle East and that it will serve the interests and rights of the Palestinian people. Hamas does not want to cut off relations with any country, including the United States. Hamas is committed to opening political dialogue with any country in order to explain its position. Hamas will expose the lies and deception of the Israeli enemy, especially in regard to its ongoing escalation against the Palestinian people in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. A number of countries have extended invitations to Hamas, and we will honor them soon. Hamas leaders will visit South Africa as soon as a timetable schedule is set. After concluding this visit, we will head to Saudi Arabia. As I mentioned earlier, we do not have any problem with visiting any European Union country or opening a dialogue with it. Our problem is only with the Israeli occupation.
زيارة أي دولة في الاتحاد الأوروبي وفتح حوار مع كل هذه الدول. نحن مشكلتنا فقط مع الاحتلال الإسرائيلي.
Today's political storm following the latest allegations of cronyism against former Knesset member and the Prime Minister's son, Omri Sharon. Joining us now is IBA's political correspondent, Dan Diker. Dan, this is bad news for Kadima coming just 22 days before the elections.
Laura, it's very, very well known in the political echelons in Israel that these daily revelations of wrongdoing, corruption, accusations against Kadima are the only thing that could really puncture this very robust lead that Kadima has just 22 days before the upcoming elections. Yes, Laura, the timing is indeed unfortunate for Kadima, and this latest scandal is, of course, being seized upon by all the political parties as a means of attacking the Kadima party. It was Channel 10 News that broke the story late last night. The reporter Raviv Drucker got hold of Omri Sharon's office diaries from 2004. Now, anyone who has spent time in the Knesset and has seen the Likud Central Committee members line up outside Omri Sharon's office. But I don't think that there's anybody who believes that Omri Sharon would be careless enough to leave written evidence of the many political favors he allegedly delivered for supporters of his father, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. But according to Channel 10, that's exactly what he did. And the Sharon diaries contain details of the jobs in government and in public companies that Omri allegedly arranged for his cronies. This latest Sharon Jr. affair has fired up the political echelon's pre-election mood. The Likud is now charging that the entire Kadima party is tainted with corruption. Labor is calling the scandal a moral and political earthquake, and Attorney General Menachem Mezuz says he'll look into the allegations against Omri Sharon, whom we all remember has already been sentenced to time in prison for previous campaign-related offenses. Kadima is saying that these allegations have nothing to do with them. They say Omri Sharon has resigned from the Knesset and from public life, is not a member of Kadima, and if he is guilty, they say, his offenses were committed while he was a member of the Likud. Laura?
Thanks, Dan. The diplomatic crisis between Israel and Jordan is over. This according to Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who briefed the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee today. Livni was responding to reports in today's daily Yediot Achronot newspaper that Jordan had frozen relations with Israel following comments by Central Command head Yair Naveh, who expressed fears that global jihadi forces in Jordan may topple King Abdullah. Livni told lawmakers that she confirmed with senior Jordanian officials that they will have put the diplomatic flap with Israel behind them. Meanwhile, Livni told the committee that Israel must work to prevent a humanitarian crisis in the Palestinian areas. Reviewing her recent trip to several European capitals, she said the EU is still formulating its policy toward the Palestinians. She warned that worsening humanitarian conditions in the PA will encourage the international community to send money to a Hamas-led Palestinian government. Livni added that Israel is making intense diplomatic efforts to isolate the radical Hamas faction in the international community. Committee Chairman Yuval Steinitz blasted Livni's comments and accused the government of failing to implement an effective policy to prevent the creation of a Hamas-led government.
If I would be a Hamas leader or voter, somebody, a Palestinian that voted for the Hamas, I wouldn't be too concerned. I would listen to Tzipi Livni or to Abi Dichter or Olmert, and I would say to myself, this is good. This is good for me as Hamas. No punishment, no harsh steps against me, nothing that will prevent the consolidation of my government and my regime. They are simply going to make another unilateral disengagement and to enable me to take control of other territories and maybe to remove the military capacities in Gaza, rockets and so on, from Gaza also to the West Bank.
You cannot, on one hand, call the world not to allow legitimation for the Hamas, and on the other hand to say, we shall give you a state also in Judah and Samaria. It's a confusion and weakness which prove both that this government, Kadima government, didn't learn anything from the past, and they are about to create even worse a catastrophe in the future to come.
In the Palestinian territories, Fatah parliamentary members walked out to the first session of the Palestinian Legislative Council after an argument ensued between Hamas and Fatah. Hamas officials voted to nullify a number of resolutions that were approved in last session of the former Fatah Council after Hamas's victory. Moreover, Fatah has accused Hamas of trying to overthrow the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas by nullifying a parliamentary resolution granting him wider presidential power.
In its first session since Hamas's victory, the Palestinian Legislative Council witnessed an altercation. The council adjourned after Fatah members walked out, protesting measures taken by Hamas to nullify a resolution approved by the former parliament giving a wider presidential power to Abbas.
Fatah and its representatives in the Palestinian Legislative Council will not take part in a session that violates primary principles of the Palestinian legal system.
In its last session, some of the resolutions that were invalidated include a motion by Fatah to expand Abbas's presidential power, giving him the privilege of appointing superior court judges.
I believe this is democracy at its best. We have planted the seeds of an opposing government and council. However, the problems and challenges facing us are still the same.
Hamas has expressed solidarity with families of the Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, confirming that the problem of detainees is a top priority for the upcoming Palestinian government. Families and relatives of Palestinian prisoners held a sit-in near the headquarters of the International Committee of the Red Cross in Gaza.
The upcoming Palestinian government has put the issue of Palestinian detainees at the top of its priority list, and it will treat it with a great deal of importance.
Hamas's visit to Moscow, which came despite an international campaign led by Washington and Tel Aviv to besiege the resistance movement, had positive outcomes. Hamas might not be able to get direct financial aid from Russia. However, by visiting Moscow, Hamas has exerted an effort to change world opinion towards the movement. Meanwhile, Saudi leaders have confirmed that they will unconditionally receive Hamas leaders. France opposed sanctions against the Palestinian Authority led by Hamas. The European Union has called on Israel to release tax revenues to the Palestinians.
In Iraq, 18 Iraqis were killed and about 60 others were injured, including a large number of police officers in different attacks in Baghdad and Baqouba. The commander of the 6th Division of the Iraqi army, who was in charge of protecting Baghdad, was killed by sniper fire west of Baghdad.
The series of car bombs targeting innocent people continue to plague the Iraqis. 7 people were killed and more than 20 others were injured, mostly children, by a car bomb at a crowded market in Baqouba, north of Baghdad.
A booby-trapped car came here and exploded. My place is close to the site of the explosion. This is aimed to create division between Iraqis.
After the police arrived to the site of the explosion, another bomb went off, killing 1 person and wounding 5 police officers. This situation has led to the accumulation of material and human losses in the city, which has been witnessing various sectarian attacks.
A booby-trapped car exploded, targeting the police, the market, and the people who were there. What did they do wrong to be killed like this?
In other attacks, 5 booby-trapped cars exploded in different areas of Baghdad and Mohammedia, injuring dozens of people. 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were hurt when terrorists exploded himself near a bank in Dura neighborhood. Unknown assailants kidnapped the dean of the engineering school in the Mustansiriya University. Another person was killed and 2 others were injured in 2 different attacks in Iskandariya in southern Baghdad. In the area of Hawija, north of Baghdad, 4 Iraqis were killed, including the leader of the Sunni Abaid tribe. While Iraqis live with this bitter reality, there has been an escalation in the intensity of violence as the political process has become more ambiguous. Establishing security and protecting the country from sectarian divisions are a concern for Iraqis, but they are unable to resolve this painful reality.
Nearly 3 months after holding the general elections, the Iraqi President Jalal al-Talibani called for the new parliament to hold its first session next Sunday. According to the Iraqi constitution, the parliament must hold its first session 2 weeks after the official announcement of the elections results, which were announced on February 10th. However, this session was delayed after the Sunnis and Kurds rejected the appointment of the Shiite United Iraqi Alliance candidate Ibrahim al-Ja'fari to the position of Prime Minister.
The spokesperson of the International Anti-Zionism Organization, Rabbi Dawoodi Lewis, in his visit to Tehran with other officials of different organizations, said that international media corporation financed by Zionism doesn't reflect authentic Jewish ideology. He confirmed that there is a deep disagreement between the Jewish mainstream thinking on one side and the Zionism movement and the Israeli government ideologies on the other side. He added that the Zionist movement started on the basis of secular beliefs. However, they carry out their aggressive actions under the banner of Judaism.
من جهة أخرى امتدح رئيس وزراء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بالوكالة إيهود أولمرت سفير.
The Israeli occupation Prime Minister Ehud Olmert praised John Bolton, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, for strongly blaming Iran. Olmert, in a satellite message to the General Assembly of the largest Israeli lobby in America, said that Iran is a threat to Israel, calling on the international community to increase pressure on Iran to prevent it from acquiring nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Tehran confirmed its determination to continue its nuclear research, warning that it will resume wide-scale enrichment if its nuclear file is transferred to the United Nations Security Council. However, it did not exclude the possibility of reaching a nuclear understanding with Russia or European countries in the coming few days.
تستبعد إمكانية التوصل إلى تفاهم نووي مع روسيا أو الدول الأوروبية خلال الساعات القليلة القادمة.
There are no signs that Iran will go back on its decision to continue nuclear research despite Western pressures and threats to transfer its nuclear file to the United Nations Security Council. Tehran, which last month actively started its nuclear research by starting up dozens of central fission projects in the Natanz complex as the first phase under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, threatened that it will respond with the resumption of wide-scale uranium enrichment if the nuclear file is transferred to the Security Council.
If our file is transferred to the Security Council, we will certainly resume uranium enrichment. Nuclear research is a part of our national sovereignty, which we cannot compromise.
Larijani remained ambiguous about the possibility that his country will use oil as a weapon in response to Western pressure and threats, which has been escalating.
We have no desire to use oil as a weapon because we respect the security of the international community. However, if the situation does not change, this will affect our position.
Tehran accused the United States of trying to foil the current diplomatic efforts between Russia and European countries by trying to rush a session of the International Atomic Energy Agency, while Tehran and Moscow were close to reaching an agreement about the Russian proposal to enrich Iranian uranium on Russian soil, thus putting the IAEA to the test, according to Tehran.
This meeting will be a major test to the IAEA to confirm its commitment to its members and to protect its international identity.
Amidst the diplomatic efforts, the public continues to support its country's nuclear program, which has been transformed into a symbol of national honor for Iran and a position of unity among different political groups. This is a very critical time for Iran's nuclear file. Western countries are pushing for transferring it, and Iran still insists on its right to have nuclear research, while the Russian proposal for enriching uranium on its soil is still on the negotiating table. Iran is trying to turn the table on its Western negotiators while keeping a close eye on the International Atomic Energy Agency and keeping all doors open for other options. Naveed Bahrout, Al-Alam TV, Tehran.
Before the start of a meeting of the UN's nuclear watchdog today that could prompt Security Council action against Tehran, Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said his country would not be bullied by political pressure. Yumna Tayyara reports.
The UN Atomic Watchdog's Board of Governors would meet today to weigh Iran's snub of calls to curb nuclear activities, opening the way to possible UN Security Council action over concerns Tehran covertly seeks atom bombs. International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Mohammad al-Baradei would submit a report to the 35-nation meeting saying Iran has largely ignored a resolution demanding that it take steps to defuse a crisis of confidence in its nuclear program. Al-Baradei's report would be forwarded forwarded to the Security Council after the gathering as mandated by a board vote a month ago after 3 years of IAEA probes often parried by Tehran. No new resolution was expected because the February motion, which at the insistence of Russia, China and developing states gave Iran a month to comply, was deemed enough for the Security Council to take up the issue. U.S. Ambassador to the UN John Bolton said Washington supported ongoing diplomatic efforts to solve the impasse, but warned that Iran must be made aware that if it continues down the path of international isolation, there would be some tangible and painful consequences. On a similar note, Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad warned the West that further pressure on Tehran would have also consequences. The official Iranian news agency IRNA quoted Ahmadinejad as urging the West to accept Iranian nation's rights and said it was then that cooperation could work out. For his part, French President Jacques Chirac told a news conference in Saudi Arabia that efforts to convince Iran to stop nuclear research would continue even though Iran had disappointed the international community.
At least 13 people were killed and scores wounded today in a series of bombings and shootings across Iraq as US-led coalition forces were accused of widespread human rights abuses in the stripped-torn country. Amid the violence, Iraq's President Jalal Talabani announced that Parliament would hold its inaugural meeting on March the 12th. Nearly 3 months after the general elections. Leading human rights group Amnesty International charged that violations of human rights continued in Iraq at the hands of the coalition and Iraqi security forces. It said tens of thousands of people had been held arbitrarily in Iraq since the start of the US-led invasion in March 2003, creating a situation that is ripe for abuse.
Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, told commanders of the country's police forces Monday that providing peace and security for people from all walks of Iranian life lies among the main duty of the police forces that is highly appreciated in the Islamic Republic. The leader also added, being mighty and strong is an inevitable necessity required by the law enforcement forces. This, as Ayatollah Khamenei added, is manifested through practicing law and order that in turn need respecting people to be well materialized. Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad planted a sapling today as a symbolic gesture to mark the Natural Resources Week, which has just begun. President Ahmadinejad attached great significance to the maintenance of the environment and called for bringing together in a basket proper opportunities, efficient human resources, and rich culture to create a reform in the country's natural resources.
Later, President Ahmadinejad pointed to the nuclear issue, saying Iran will neither accept nor exert pressure. He said the other states should adjust their stance on the matter according to that of the Iranian nation and understand that their propaganda will have no impact on national decisions.
We have chosen the right way within the framework of international regulations and are acting accordingly. We believe in this right way. Our nation has chosen its way correctly. We think the others should adjust their stance to the law and the Iranian nation's will.
Mr. Ahmadinejad, who is also chairman of the Supreme National Security Council, added Tehran would reconsider its decisions if it comes under pressure from certain states. He made it clear that Iran acts under international law and favors global peace, so those governments do not have to create problems for themselves or this country.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.